Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Lacey Baier is a calm and steady voice in the wellness space for women. Her science-backed nutrition advice, protein-forward recipes, and meal prepping strategies have helped thousands of people to fuel their bodies with nourishing food while building healthy eating habits that actually stick. Consistency beats perfection every single time is the guiding principle that has shaped Lacey's long-running blog, a Sweet Pea Chef, popular YouTube channel, and her latest book, Cleanish Meal Prep, high protein recipes for real life. After years of struggling with her weight, Lacey experienced the first real wake-up call as a 200-pound bride-to-be. She obsessively counted calories to lose weight, but in the process, she also lost her energy, her joy, and her muscle mass. To reset her health and fitness, Lacey stopped chasing thinness and eliminated strict calorie counting. Instead, she prioritized strength and sustainable self-care by focusing on food quality, protein intake, realistic meal prep, and strength training. For over 15 years, Lacey has coached women through sustainable weight loss while also navigating her own weight loss journey. Lacey Baier, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's very exciting to host you. Thank you so very much for being here. I'm very much looking
Yeah.
forward to your book. We joked about this offline. I've kind of joked in the past. We're going to change the name of this podcast to Victory Belt Publishing since we host so many of your wonderful authors. You guys do such an amazing job,
Yeah.
all of you. So it sounds like you've had a really good partnership with them with your latest book coming up. How has the process been? I know this is your second book, but
Yes.
describe like the process of writing a book.
It's kind of fun at first, when you have all the ideation and you think about how cool it could be, and then you get down to actually doing it, and it's like, oh my God, what did I promise I was going to do? But I think it's also fun because I get to create a bunch of recipes that I don't normally have. Like I'm such a creature of habit that I have like the same, I probably 4 to 6 meals just kind of in rotation all of the time. And so it's so different to just make new recipes all of the time. And so my kids love it too, because they get all sorts of different food.
I'm very jealous. That sounds amazing. And you're also in the Austin area, correct?
I am, yes.
Oh my gosh, what
Yeah.
an amazing place to live for food. I can't think about Austin without thinking about Cooper's Barbecue downtown and the best smoked ribeye I've ever had in my life. I dream about
Really?
it. Oh, so
It's funny.
good.
There's so many barbecue places. I've actually never been to Cooper's here, but there's a Cooper's out in Lano. I think I've been to as well. But
Okay.
there's so many good restaurants out here, and it's kind of starting to feel like a little mini New York where everything is getting better and better, and there's so much good competition. So it's really neat.
Yeah, one of my favorite experiences ever in my life was doing a dinner with a group of people at some barbecue joint. I don't even know where it was. We jumped in the car and ended up at some place, and like sitting in the back of this kind of rundown barbecue joint was just the food was amazing. The company was amazing. You're right. There's so many amazing places to find great food in
Yeah.
Austin.
Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming sometimes, but especially if you don't eat out as often. So you got to make like what you do count.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep, that's awesome. First question I wanted to ask you before we get into your own like personal story is the word
Yeah.
cleanish. Can you describe what you mean when you use the word cleanish?
It came out of me trying to be all or nothing clean eating. And I was kind of really struggling. I tend to be an all or nothing kind of person. And so I was trying to be a perfectionist with everything I was eating, counting every calorie, really, really focused on like, got to get 10,000 steps. Everything was so perfect. And I started to fall and fail with that because it's like impossible to stay in that mindset and that framework always. You can't, like, it's not human to be perfect all of the time. And so I all of a sudden realized, it's actually not clean, it's clean-ish that jives with me better. That's the way to make it work, right? Because you have to make that lifestyle that you want to do like fit your actual real life. And so I came up with the term of cleanish because I really like the idea of, progress over perfection, that it doesn't have to be so perfect to be valuable. And so I kind of just jived with me because I had been so like on the blog that was when I was doing it was with the Sweet Pea Chef, where I was really focused on clean eating and like throwing out options that wouldn't have like quite the right like ingredient. I was like, I can't do that. It has, it's not clean. It's not 100% clean. And it kind of wore me out. So the idea of that it didn't have to be 100% perfect really resonated with me. And then whenever I tell people about it, they're like, "Huh, I'm cleanish," and they kind of get that, and it really it seems to have made a mark.
Yeah, no, I really love that. A large portion of our audience is following some type of a restrictive diet,
Yes.
generally like a low carbohydrate or, to some extent, carnivore diets and that kind of thing. And it's great because you eliminate a lot of things that could be questionable in some people's diets, but it's always something you need to be conscious of. Are you being too strict? Are you restricting too much? Like
Yeah.
there's a really fine line, and even in the same person over the course of time being really
Oh,
restrictive
totally.
might be great for a few months,
Yeah.
but it might not be the best thing forever. So it's really
Yeah.
it's really good thing to always be examining and looking at, like, am I being too restrictive? Am I getting the results that I need? And how can I
Yeah.
pivot and change things over time?
Right. Right. And I mean, it applies to more than just food also, right? It could be exercise or, relationships and whatnot. You have to kind of take it with a grain of salt and think about it in a more realistic way of like, is this actually what I'm wanting? And does it fit into my goals? And do I have to be 100% to get there? But I
Yeah.
agree that sometimes you kind of have to, like, say you're preparing for a show or something, like you have to be all in on something, but that's not always. I mean, and
Yeah.
the typical person isn't doing that.
Exactly. The typical person is not doing that. When we're talking
Yeah.
about, protein intake, for example, I don't think hardly anybody even knows what protein is. And when you talk to them about, how much protein they're getting, it's like embarrassingly low. It's so
Yeah.
bad out there. And that's the kind of target audience we're trying to really impact
Yes,
the most.
for sure. For sure. I
Yeah,
agree.
that's
I
amazing.
talk to so many women when I ask them like, what are they eating in the day? They explain just how well it's not as much as they should be eating to begin with, but it's like very small portions, but it's just all carbs and fat, and it's crazy how little protein women are eating. But
Yeah. Yep, that's amazing. Let's talk about your own health journey. We mentioned in
mhm.
the introduction you had dealt with weight
Yeah,
problems and turned to what most people would kind of turn to, which is calorie counting and calorie burning and the calories in calories out kind of idea of things.
yeah.
Tell us about your journey of health, and how you eventually got to be a person who's writing a book about protein.
Yeah, it was kind of neat to hear you say my whole story there. I was like, wow, that does sum it up right there. It's crazy, but I have felt like I've always struggled with weight. Going back to high school, I've always felt like I was overweight and didn't didn't feel comfortable in my skin. And then I got into college and I was like, oh, I actually wasn't overweight then. I'm overweight now. So I started gaining a bunch of weight, got into a graduate program then, and I want to say, right around the time when my husband and I got engaged, I was about 215 pounds or so, which he is a 6'4" guy and was almost as much as I was. I mean, I was almost as much as he was. So that was a very big eye-opening event for me because I was just like, I can't weigh as much as him. This isn't right, And and so I started. There was not a lot of information back then when I was trying to lose weight. It was really, I feel like learning about calories in versus calories out was like one of the main new concepts at the time. And so I started doing that, and it was like, oh my God, this works. I can lose weight. All I have to do is focus on eating less. And it started working. And I was really excited because I finally felt like I was in control of what I was doing. Because before then it was I had resigned myself that I was just going to be overweight. Like I like food too much. I'm not going to be able to stay like be fit or anything, especially once I stopped doing a lot of sports activities and such. So once I uh, started doing the calorie counting, I thought it was a godsend that I was like, oh my God, I can lose weight. All I have to do is focus on this. But then it, as it is wont to do, it started compacting on itself. And I was like, okay, well, no, I'm not light enough now. I need to keep losing. I need to keep restricting. And I started having more of a mental battle with myself of, if I got over 1,100 calories in that day, that was too many. What am I doing? I can't control it. I think, and it's all about control. um, and so I wound up losing for the wedding that was like 6 or 8 months later. I wound up losing the weight that I was looking to lose, but I had no energy. I hated life. I was scared to death of food, and I just really never wanted to I don't know, I was afraid of eating, which sucks because I love food. And so that kind of kept going a little bit longer. I got to my goal weight, which was not what because at the point that time I was pretty much just, I had no muscle, I had no energy or anything. So getting to the goal weight didn't really mean that much because I didn't look like I weighed. I think it was like 130 pounds is what I was trying to get to. And so at the same time that I got to that point, we wound up having some children, and I started gaining weight again. And I was terrified because I didn't want to have to do calorie counting again because I knew how awful it was to lose that weight. And so now I was already back up to the weight that I had been almost because of being pregnant. And which is a really hard thing to do as a woman, to lose weight and then become pregnant because you're getting weighed. And I know there's a bigger picture there, and it's not like just weight, but it's like the concept of that now you weigh that much again. It's really difficult. And so I had to find a different way to lose the weight. And so I started learning about clean eating and realized that if I started just removing the processed foods from my diet and instead focused on the quality of the foods, I found that I was feeling a lot fuller and more energy, and I didn't really gain any weight when I was doing that. And then it's like 20 years to pack into this story. So sorry, so fast forward. I started doing strength training, and I started just in my house with doing like body weight exercises because I had no idea what I was doing. My husband would go to the gym with his brother, and I'd be like, okay, what can I do at home? Because I was at home with the baby. And so I kind of taught me a few things. I'd start doing that with the strength training with body weight at home. And then that turned into getting some dumbbells at home and building out a little home gym. And I realized the value of muscle and how freaking amazing it is. And then that kind of transformed my understanding of using my clean eating foods into how do I support building more muscle because I want to do more of this. And that's where protein came in, where I started recognizing, okay, actually, it's not about losing weight. It's about, satisfying what my body needs in order to perform better. And so, and then from there, it was just like, okay, how do I make this work even more efficiently? And so that's kind of where I'm at now, where I've kind of come full circle from completely restricting to now how much can I eat in order to sustain that, and what does my body need in terms of not just maintenance but also muscle building and body recomposition. Does that in a nutshell make sense?
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a great story and so common. Both you and I have been coaching people for quite a while at this point, so I'm just curious in your experience if you can relate to this. I think people can get seemingly really good results with weight loss counting calories if they do it like one time. The very first time that they try it, they start to reduce the calories. You will lose weight. You increase the exercise, you will lose weight. Totally. I spent over a decade working on a metabolic cart where I would measure people's baseline metabolism. And what would happen, as most people know, is that if you do calorie restriction, you will start to decrease your own innate energy production, and that will start to slow down. And so I feel like calorie counting can work once and be really enticing. But once you do it the first time and then you cause that rebound, it's so much harder to like have it work the second time or a third time or a fourth time. Has that been your experience as well?
That has been, and I did flip over a few times where I did try it again to lose the weight, and after I had done it that first time, and it was just it's too much to put your brain through. It's too that restriction, and then again, also I think I was more. I know me, and when I do something, I go all in on it, and so all in on calorie counting is kind of dangerous if you're constantly moving your target lower and lower. And so I agree with you. I think that it doesn't teach the right lesson other than understanding what calories are made of in your food and understanding that piece of it, and then recognize, oh shoot, I'm eating like 600 calories for this one thing. This is too much or whatever. So definitely. So having the awareness of it and understanding it, as it's kind of Pandora's box, unfortunately, because once you open it, you're like, man, never gonna be able to eat a candy bar again. but
yeah, totally. No, it's even like I wish that people wouldn't even like throw up the idea of calories in, calories out. It's just almost like I wish people would think about it backwards. Like what you're talking about, eating a lot of
Yes.
protein and strength training, those two things both help boost your own calorie burning on its own. They help your
Yeah,
metabolic rate stay really high so that you don't need
totally.
to worry about the calories or the protein associating that you only can eat so much before you get really full and you don't want to
Yeah.
eat food anymore.
Right, totally. And I mean, there's only so much chicken breast one can eat. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
You're never going to want to grab more.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome. Before we get into the protein side of things, I did want to talk to you a little bit about the strength training. You said you started at home with
yes,
bands. If somebody has had no experience with strength training, what are some things you would recommend for people?
that's a good question. I mean, I think that the easiest thing is that your legs are the easiest thing to work out at home if you have literally nothing at home, right? And so it's really like lunges and squats and bodyweight squats and all of that. They can be so valuable, and you can build up a ton of resistance just with your body. And so I feel like the things that really made a difference for me was realizing that you kind of want to get yourself to a base level to even be ready to do weights, I think, and so I found that just having a routine, because I feel like that was one of the most important pieces for me, like the having a consistent plan of what I was going to do and just writing down like 3 exercises per body part and muscle group, and that really helped me start tracking it, become someone who felt like she was doing strength training. I feel like there's an identity behind it that if you just go from zero to the gym, it's really overwhelming and you don't know what to do. So having a little bit of, if you're someone who likes to, I don't know, feel like you belong in what you're doing, which I mean, I feel like that's kind of the human condition. We want to be validated in what we're doing, right? If you can put together something that makes you feel confident, like, okay, I understand what a body squat is. I understand what lunges are, or calf raises, or even push-ups or something like that. That at the very least I can go to a gym and I can do those exact same things. And so kind of the way I look at the home stuff is really more, I mean, I have a home gym, so I don't technically go to the gym anymore, but I kind of looked at it as a progression, that it's kind of like if you start there, everybody has to start somewhere. Nobody starts knowing what they're doing with weight training. And so I feel like not feeling like getting started at home is a bad idea, because a lot of people have stigma around it, which I don't understand that. But
No, I think that's wonderful advice, just starting where you are. And there are some very simple things you can do at home, at whatever level you are, that can start to
yeah,
build muscle. And you mentioned lower body in particular. You find a lot of the bigger muscle groups in the body in the lower body. So you're really getting
totally,
a good bang for the buck if you're, working on, a deadlift, a squat, a lunge, those types of things. You're really like
totally.
capitalizing on some of the biggest muscle groups in the body. So yeah,
Yeah.
I really love that. I think that's amazing advice. Tell us a little bit more detail about your journey through nutrition and getting to the point that you decided that protein was the thing that you wanted to focus the most on?
That's a good question. I think what I got really into protein smoothies, and I would start sharing them on YouTube, and I would do recipes, and I at home, because they're so easy, and I had little kids, and I was like, okay, I need a quick meal that's easy, that just doesn't take a lot of time, and the kids even like. And so I would make those protein shakes, and then I'd go do videos on them, like 5 different ways to do a protein smoothie or whatever. And all of these women would start replying to me, emailing me, commenting, being like, what protein powder do you use? What are you using? How much do you use? How do you pick it? And all of that. And I realized, because it was so apparent with all these comments of just like, there's no information, not no information, women aren't getting the same information that I think men get in terms of protein. That because it was women that were that were my followers. That was my subject group. They didn't really understand how to use protein, how much to have, how much their body would perform better at, and all of that. And so I realized there was this hole that I could help fill, because I had learned that on my own personally as I was building out my own nutritional lifestyle and understanding what I needed. And so but then, you can only get so far with protein powder. That's just really a supplement. And then how else do you put it into your food? How do you incorporate that and like have a protein forward meal and all of that? And so it kind of is just grown from my own learnings and then talking about it and then realizing that there's an information knowledge gap between my followers and myself and how I can help teach them what I learned on my own, So does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that's amazing. Yeah, yeah, totally. So if somebody were asking you about protein and asking you like, what does protein even do? Why do we consume it? What does our bodies do with it? Like, how do you explain what protein even is and why we need it?
The way that I have learned is the best to describe it to someone who doesn't know is that protein helps you feel fuller. It helps with metabolism. It helps regulate your blood sugar, especially if you're someone who's already eating a lot of carbs, and it helps restore your muscle if when you break it down, especially. And basically, it's amazing, and eating it makes you feel full. And it actually takes one of the best ways to teach someone to eat more protein is you actually burn more calories when you eat protein compared to the other. It has more thermic effect, right? And so I feel like having that knowledge of it's not just meat or whatever, and there's more value to it. Which I also teach people about carbs too, that it's not just a potato. There's actually a real value to it. I know we're going to disagree on the value of carbs between the two of us, but I do feel like having the understanding that eating more protein also helps with removing cravings and making you feel fuller. And those are some major pain points for women who are trying to lose weight. So it's a pretty easy sell. The harder part is teaching people how to have it, if that makes sense. So like, that's why I think having the protein shakes, and they're so easy and they're pretty and colorful and all that makes sense. Like, okay, this looks like something I can do. But if you're talking about how to incorporate it into like a meal, it's a little bit more difficult for people.
Yeah, gotcha. And what are the best sources of protein out there? We can talk about animal products or plant products, whatever people want to do out there is totally fine with us. We may disagree about the carbohydrates. That's okay. Tell us what some of the best sources of protein are out there.
Well, I feel like animal proteins are by far and away one of the best you can have. They have the more bioavailability for the protein and all of that. So that means your body can absorb it better. It's like made to have it. It feels like, right. And so my diet typically is I'm not as high in plant proteins as others, but it's usually chicken and beef and a fish. And I feel like those are like the three main animal products that I have. And then I do supplement with, I do have plant-based protein powder that I use. And I mean, you can get protein in so many different forms. So, but I think that personally, the best way to do it is to have, if one is open to eating animal meat, that having that and then supplementing with other pieces to make it so it's not just always the same thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know you have in the past. I assume you still do. You've made a plant-based protein. Is that correct?
I
Plant-based protein
did. I
powder.
did. We've discontinued it for right now, and in order to focus on other things, with the costs of everything going up, it was a really hard decision. But at the same time, it was an easy decision to put a pause on that. But yeah, we
I
created a plant-based protein powder for that.
Yeah, I've talked to people who have been in that space and creating supplements and protein powders, and the amount of challenges in all of that stuff is so crazy. I was going to ask you what was so
Yeah,
challenging about even creating the protein to begin with.
yeah. I mean, going back to that all or nothing, I needed to be perfect um, ingredient list. It was really difficult to get people on board that I'm like, no, I'm not adding that sugar. That's not what we're gonna do. Like I am sorry, we're gonna have to do monk fruit or we're gonna have to do something else. And having to put my I had to always really push to get what I wanted with them, that it was a big uphill battle. And then on top of that, I don't know, like there's a lot of difficult pieces with protein powder that companies try to make. There's so much bad protein powder out there. Let me just say that either flavor, texture, or ingredients, or all three, right? And so it's really difficult to find a really solid one that you can trust, that you feel like is good for you. And so I knew that if I was going to come up with a protein powder, I needed to be all three of those things. And so that took like 2.5 years to get going,
Wow,
just to get it. And then as it was in production or almost in production, COVID happened and everything shut down. So
great.
yeah, It was fun.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I've got a good friend who was making a protein bar and kind of had the same um, kind of concept idea. Like she wanted to make
Yeah.
the highest quality and everything, and all the shenanigans that she had to go through to get the thing
Shenanigans is a good word.
processed.
Yeah.
Yeah, ingredients would be inconsistent, and shipping
Yeah.
would be weird, and they would melt, and all these things to get like such a high cost, low margin product out there. She loved
Yeah.
doing it because it was an amazing product, but it was so
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. And then if you consider all the different vendors that are involved in it that you don't really think about, like the pea protein has to come from somewhere. The bags come from a different spot. Like, so, and there's a lot of coordination, a lot of project management,
Oh my
which I
gosh.
tend to be good at. But like, if everybody is late and not doing what you're asking them to do, it's really sad. It's hard.
Well, I'm glad I used the word shenanigans. It sounds just about right.
It was
Okay,
perfect. Yeah.
let's go back to protein and the amount recommended. We have an RDA for protein, which is kind of like a general recommendation. What do you agree or disagree with the general recommendation, the RDA for protein for most people? And if not, what kind of amount of protein do you recommend?
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, the RDA by like the government is
Yeah,
dangerously low, in my opinion. I feel like it is basically a just minimal sustainable level. That it's not. Well, it is a recommended daily amount. Like you should be getting that minimum amount in order to like stay alive. I feel like that's where that conversation ends, and where if you're someone who is just not weightlifting or doing anything, it tends to be more closer to almost 1 gram per pound, right? And so I think that it really depends on your goals at that point on how much you want to push it. Some people do 1.2 and some people go all down to 0.7. And so I think that having just increasing it to where it's like, I don't know, I think most people are not even having half of their weight in grams each day. So just increasing it at any rate, like starting at 10 grams a meal, and then building up and ideally getting to be around 30 to 40 grams and depending on where you're at and what you're able to process.
gotcha. Okay, I am going to backtrack a little bit. I do have a question for you. I agree with you as far as the animal proteins are generally going to be more complete. Want to try to include
Yes.
those for our vegan and vegetarian friends.
Yes.
With vegetarian, it's a little bit easier because you could have eggs, you could have dairy, you could get a little bit of
Yeah,
that animal protein
totally.
to kind of
That's a
fill
good
that gap.
question.
For somebody who is vegan, it's harder. It's not impossible.
Totally.
I've got friends that are vegan and have been vegan for decades, and they figure it out and they can gain muscle and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What recommendations do you have for people that do want to choose, the plant-based proteins? How do they combine them or think about them to make sure they're getting, a complete balance of all the protein that they need?
That's a really good question. I mean, protein powder supplements are very valuable in that regard as well, because like the plant-based proteins that can mix different proteins that are in powder form that make it easy to supplement. I think that's so helpful for anyone, even if you're not vegan and you're trying to, one of the hardest things I hear from my clients is like, you want me to eat how much protein? I can't, and so having a protein supplement is really helpful. But I think that, combining different like tofu and tempeh and all of the different options that you can have with soybeans, and there's all sorts of different foods that one can do, and quinoa, that you can build your meals around that instead. And it's a lot easier to build a meal around a meat or something like that. I think that's where most people's minds like kind of just go towards. But if it doesn't it is not impossible by any means. And there's so many options out there now for how to kind of change up plant-based proteins in foods. Like I remember when I kind of toyed with the idea years ago, and it was basically like tofu. That was all you could do. I think it's a lot more difficult. I think it's more of a challenge for plant-based and like vegan people that but having the access to, I think, understanding what amino acids are in which proteins. And do not ask me that. I do not know for sure. I just know that quinoa is a great option. And understanding which specific proteins one is lacking so that we can get all of those essential amino acids. I think that is the kind of the key to figuring that all out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Just because we recommend, a certain way or specialize in a certain way of eating doesn't mean we want to close the door to anybody who chooses a different
Oh,
way if that's
absolutely.
working for them. Just because I like ice hockey doesn't mean I'm yelling at people who like baseball. You know what I mean? Like it's
Oh,
all
yeah.
of it is available,
Yeah.
and I agree perfectly with what you said. Like it's more challenging, but it's not
Yeah.
impossible. And
Right.
today's
Right.
day and age with all kinds of different protein products and different ways to combine foods, you can do this
Totally.
any way that you approach that.
Yeah.
And you're kind of highlighting an innate kind of issue where you're saying we're recommending this much protein, hardly anybody is getting that much protein, and this leads to this kind of like problem that leads you to write your book. Like, why is it so challenging for most people to get the amount of protein that they need, and why do we need to think about meal prepping protein to be able to overcome some of those challenges?
That's a really good question. I think that I think society wise, meat isn't, or protein isn't what we grow up thinking we're supposed to eat. I don't know. I've been thinking on that, on how it is. Cause I remember going out to lunch with my now husband, and we'd get like a sandwich, and I would have like one slice of turkey breast or whatever on like a little thin slice of it. And I'd be like totally fine with that on my sandwich. And he'd be like, what the heck? I need more meat on this. There's no meat. And I'd be like, God, you always need the meat. It's like ridiculous. But I think it's also not in, I think there's something to do with gender differences too, that like uh somehow men figured that part out, that they needed that more earlier. And I don't know how that's happening, because there's so much lack of understanding of how much protein we need for women. And I sorry, that took me down the path of that story, so I got myself sidetracked. But I feel like there is a difficulty. Most people don't understand how to cook certain proteins. I think like chicken breast can be really dry, and it's really not enjoyable to eat for a lot of people. And if they don't understand how to cook it, which it can be absolutely delicious, assuming that you eat chicken, if you don't understand how to cook it or what to cook with it, it becomes difficult. And so it's so easy to think of, doing a spaghetti or something, because you just put the meat in that. It's like, okay, that one's set. I get that. But when you're doing like a pork chop or a steak or a chicken, like what do you add with it? What do you do with it? And then it's not really the meals that people grew up eating. So it's harder to kind of think about how they make it all work together. And so meal prep for me has always been a way to set myself up for success, where I don't want to have it come to be coming home tired, hungry, and starving, really, and looking in the fridge, seeing everything that like I didn't defrost or something, and there's nothing to cook, and deciding instead to go out to dinner, order DoorDash or something, which used to be the case with us. So that like we would just come home and it'd be like, I'm sorry guys, PB&J's tonight, and because we were so busy that it was really difficult. And especially if you have kids in the house and you have to get it all together, it's a lot. It's a heavy lift to do when you're tired coming home from work and doing all of that stuff. So I learned at that time that meal prep was amazing, because I could just take the time where I was free, and start cooking the meals and preparing that stuff, and even portioning it out ready, so I don't have to weigh any of it or anything. And I know exactly the amount that I'm getting, because I was tracking my food at the time. How do I set myself up so I can just not think, grab and eat? And and that really saved me a lot of energy in the during the week, and set me up to be able to lose the weight that I was able to lose.
Wow. You said you had 4 kids, is that right?
I have 4 kids. Yes. Yes.
You mentioned having some free time. What free time did you have if you have 4 kids? Like
I
writing
know.
books
Running
and
my own
doing
business
blogs.
and doing all that. Yeah. I don't
Oh
know.
my
They're
gosh.
good kids. They're good kids. But I don't know. I think about that sometimes, and I just it really is a matter of finding small things you can do that get you moving towards progress. That it doesn't have to be everything. It's just, what small step can I do right now to get me to the next phase, but
Yeah.
and then just
Well,
repeating.
if anybody has an excuse not to meal prep, it's you, so that you were able to figure out how to do the meal preps during a very busy week. Kind of makes it possible for everybody to be thinking about that. So, what are some of the practical tips that you recommend for people when they're starting to think about how am I going to prep for, are you trying to get enough prep done one day of the week so that you take care of the entire week? Is it something you have to split up so that you have meals throughout the week? You maybe need to do it 2 or 3 times a week. Like, what practical things do you recommend for people?
If you're just starting out with meal prep and you're not someone that really loves to cook, I say start simple and pick one day a week where you know you have a little bit of extra time. Usually it's on the weekends for people where they have a little bit of extra time, and pick just one meal that you know you like, that you can prep ahead and prep that. And that way you have at least that one meal that week, and you can see how effective that is because you have it ready to go. And it's basically leftovers, right? But really you're prepping it ahead. And so like I grew up leftovers being like my dad would put old spaghetti like on a paper plate and wrap it in saran wrap. And by the time you went to go get it, it was gross and it was disgusting. So like this is much more appropriate leftovers, if you can set yourself up for just trying that one meal, and you don't try something new, don't go crazy until you really understand the mechanics behind meal prep, that you understand like, okay, this is what I can get done in this time frame. Because I think a lot of people, what they tend to do is they go and they like search Pinterest and they find some recipe that seems cool from someone they don't know, and they try that and like 3 other recipes, and they taste it and they're like, oh, I don't like this, and I don't even want to eat it, and then they waste the food. So starting small with something you'll like and you'll want to grab, and just doing that one meal, and then you kind of add on to it. You're like, okay, I was able to handle the one day, how do I do more? And to your question on, is it better to do it once a week, part the way through the week, or multiple times? I think that's an individual difference. Personally, I like to get it all done in one day and be done. But if you're having things like fish or something in your meal prep, sometimes you want to do just a couple servings of that, and then get that going. Or another way people can do it is if you're making your dinner for that night, just buy like 4 to 5 times more than you would have normally cooked, and then store the rest. That way you're just cooking that one meal, but it's going to get left over for later.
Yeah, no, those are all really, really good tips. And I love that your cookbook has so many different recipes, but that doesn't mean that people are going to be buying the book and cooking every single one of those recipes. They're probably
Totally.
going to do
Yeah.
what you and I do, what you described you do, is like you find, 3 or 4 that you really enjoy and you don't really get sick of that much, and you can kind of make them on rotation to get easier and easier to
Mm-hmm.
make, which means less time every time. And so yeah, I think those are all really practical tips, and especially just finding the ones that you already know that you like just makes it so much easier.
Yeah. 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 And then that way you're not left. It's the worst part is throwing away meal prep, that you're like, I spent all this time and energy and money on this. And like, you don't want to do that. And so that's why I try to make my recipes as simple as possible and make it so that, obviously nobody's going to love every recipe because people have individual taste differences, and somebody might not like cottage cheese, or somebody might not eat meat. So there's different parts that would make something more tricky that way. But yeah, the way that I wrote the cookbook was kind of a guide that kind of takes you from beginner stage to more expert, not really expert, but more intermediate. And so it kind of starts out with, okay, so you're doing meal prep. Let's talk about the reasons why we do that. Start with this really simple one, and they kind of graduate through it. So it can also be used as a cookbook, and just kind of using all the recipes still work for that, but it kind of breaks it apart into from simple to more intermediate. And then, okay, now you're a pro. How do we do this?
Yeah,
So.
amazing. So for somebody who is Grubhubbing a lot of their meals, you're looking at some level of investment up front. Now, I would argue that whatever investment you have to get the equipment you need to cook, to clean, to store the food, like you are going to spend a little bit more money in the beginning, but I would argue that within a very short amount of time, that money will be paying you back exponentially as you use the same things. For somebody who's just getting started with this, what would you say the things that are the best, like bang for the buck, as far as, again, like cooking, storing, things that are like really simple, maybe low cost, that you would think of as close to essential as you can get?
Good question. I think that meal prep containers are worth their weight in what you pay for them, because like you're saying, just ordering meal prep containers that comes in like a pack of, I don't know, 6 to 8, is about what you would pay for a dinner on DoorDash, I think. So having that, and getting glass ones so you can put them in the microwave and it's not too big of a deal. Because when I started out, I had all plastic ones, and I'm like, shoot, now I've got to go get glass ones. So buying some glasses. They're everywhere. They were actually really hard to find when I first got started meal prepping, but it's like it's everywhere now.
Wow.
And definitely I like bulk meal prep containers as well. So like there's individual portions. It really depends on how someone wants to approach their meals. But if you're wanting to just do simple like protein, carb, veggie, and then you take those and you put them into your meal, and you just have you just did all the extra cooking time, and now you're just like reheating it or tossing it together on the stove. Doing some larger meal prep containers are really helpful, where you can like fit, like 3 pounds of chicken in it or whatever, or like several cups of quinoa or whatever. I
Yeah.
think those.
No, that sounds like a
Sorry.
slight improvement over a plate and saran wrap.
Oh my gosh. I think about that all the time, and it's just how bad it was. And like that was how we stored meals. I know that was probably just my weird family, but but it was awful. We did not have Tupperware at our house.
Yeah, I'm sure my family did the same thing. And you're right. Like I was thinking as you were saying that, like I can't even remember the last time I bought my glass containers. They just seem to last a really, really long time. And we have
Yeah.
all the different sizes, and they do have different uses. If I'm cooking up a whole batch of, chicken breast or steak all at once, and I want to use that for meals during the week, the bigger
Yeah.
containers are usually great. Let's say somebody does have a little bit more income. They've got, more interest in this. They want to spend a little bit more money. These are not essential things. These are kind of like splurges for you in particular. What has been worth, spending a little bit more money on, whether that's, a really great chef's knife or a sous vide or a smoker or any of those things. Like what other tools, if somebody does have more that they want to invest in this, have been really helpful for you?
Totally. I was going to say chef knife, because I think that knives are like, you go to an Airbnb and have to cook there overnight, you realize how the importance of a good chef knife, that being able to chop and to use that, it saves so much time and heartache. And then a slow cooker, which is, boring but fun, because you can just put it in there and forget about it. And you can go do anything from, making a soup or a stew that'll last, or you can braise meat, which is great because you can just put it in there and forget about it. To that same point, an Instant Pot is also very helpful, because you can just put it in and it saves you a ton of time. So I'm all about letting other things do the work while I'm doing other things that, are like chopping or whatever. So, and even then with chopping, if you're trying to save time, buying things that are already pre-chopped is another way to do it. If you don't like cutting, it's one of the things I find cathartic for myself. I like chopping and cutting things, but so I guess I'm in the right profession, but but I think that those are really valuable. Let me see what else. Good pans are really helpful. I've just recently started using cast iron everything, and I've been really enjoying it. But I think having some like a good stock pot, a good large fry pan, like skillet, and a smaller skillet. I think those are like the three main things that I would focus on in getting good quality, especially nowadays when you hear about all the different chemicals and all that can be in those things when they start cracking and chipping. We all have those pans where there's chips in them. Taking the time to find a good quality one does really help with the quality of the food that you're cooking.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, our slow cooker and Instant Pot have more than paid for themselves.
Oh
As
yeah.
far as like a very simple tool, like if you're running out the door, to throw like a package of chicken breasts with a can of salsa in the slow cooker is like so easy, and you'll at least have
It's
a
so
versatile protein that you can use in lots of different ways later on. And yeah, cast iron pans also awesome. Last literally thousands of years, and it will be very helpful in the zombie apocalypse when that comes around. You can whack a
yep.
zombie in the head with them.
Mm-hmm. Dual
Yeah,
usage.
amazing. Exactly. No, those are all really great tips and things to be thinking about as far as the prep goes. As far as the recipes go, what have been the most popular recipes that you've come up with?
Um, People always like the protein ice creams. So a Ninja Creamy is also super helpful, by the way. I was thinking on that, because you can just literally make tasty ice cream with protein in it, and it's like almost just as good as real ice cream, right? I mean, this real ice cream has its own benefits, but like if you're gonna have a protein one, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. I think having overnight oats are always a big hit, and so I have like a cherry pie overnight oats in this cookbook that's really, really good. And I just love the idea of you probably don't have overnight oats, but I'm realizing, but the idea of having just like foods that are ready to grab, that are easy to prep ahead, which is why I think overnight oats are such a big winner for people. I made a cottage cheese bowl, which is like a Mediterranean one that has all these different flavors in it. That's been really fun. But I think um, the other one that people tend to like are sheet pan meals, right? So like sheet pan fajitas, or I have one where I lay out like pork chops and not asparagus, Brussels sprouts and a few other things. And it's just so easy. Like the idea that you can just, all you have to do is the prep and you put it in there and it cooks and then it's done, just like the slow cooker or whatever. It's so helpful. And it just makes your life so much easier.
Yeah, that's awesome. As a mom of four, what challenges have you found as far as getting your kids to eat enough protein? You hear all the time, like, oh, my kid will only eat, either chicken nuggets or, chips or whatever, and doesn't eat anything else. Like, how challenging is it to feed children the protein that they need for their growing bodies?
That's a good question. I mean, protein shakes have been really helpful with that. Or then you can always make like a protein energy ball or something that will just disappear in the house. If you don't even have to tell them that there's protein in there. My family obviously knows because they know that I'm making protein stuff. But they having quick snacks is always helpful to supplement and get those in there. And just kind of having that as part of the meal and not really forcing the protein part has been helpful. I do notice though, as my kids change different stages of life, that what they used to eat, they start not eating as much. And somehow kids are able to just not be hungry, and which I don't understand, but, and so they, having something that incorporating them into it and asking what sounds good to them and then finding the way to make it work is the biggest way. And then having them cook along with you is such a big win because they love that part of it. And then they feel more like involved, and it's not just like, eat this, which I've tried. That doesn't work very well.
Yeah, that is such an amazing tip. And I think a lot of people miss that. One of the best tips I've heard from a parent, through these interviews on the podcast is like they only have, decent options for snacks available in the house, whether that's meat sticks or cut up fruit or whatever.
Yeah.
So that when the kid wants a snack, they say, okay, go and choose. You can choose. It's your call, whatever snack you want, because you're not going to find the crappy fruit snacks and food dyes and, lots of sugary crap. They just have more healthy options, but there are options, and that kid has the autonomy to be able to choose and be involved with their food. It's such a game changer. They feel like they can have whatever they want.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that's all we want, right? Is just an option, a choice in the matter. And I think that the kids are really easy that way because they're not caring about the calories piece of things yet, right? So they can go grab something and they enjoy it, and that's good for them. And if you can make that a healthy option for them to grab, that's awesome.
Yeah. No, I've also heard from a lot of parents, like you were saying, like the kids will kind of over time choose the things that they know make them feel good or boost their athletic performance in sports and things like that. And so
Yeah.
it's not as difficult to get them to eat protein. They're kind of on board with it a little bit easier once they do that. So that's amazing. Your book is available for pre-order. Is there anything else in the book that you want to highlight and talk about it? There's something that you're very proud of that you include in the book?
I do really like the structure of it. It's something that I haven't seen before, where it's not just a cookbook, it's a guide, and I get to kind of teach in it a little bit more than just recipes. And I think that having, I also have meal plans that you get with it, that you kind of incorporate those pieces, because meal plans can be so helpful. People really like, and myself included, structure, and having something that you can just go to and, okay, this is what I'm making. This is the grocery list. I'm good. I got this. And so I have a bunch of, because I love teaching. So I have a bunch of tools and all that you can, if you get the book, you'd also get access to my website, where I give you a bunch of stuff to download. So I don't know, I'm excited about it. I can't believe it's already here, almost here. So available for pre-order now.
That's amazing. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, as much as we, again, choose a certain specific diet, if you ask me one piece of advice that would benefit most people, my number one thing every single time would be eat more protein. And you have made this very accessible and approachable for anybody. Anybody can benefit from that. So can't wait for the book to come out. I know it's going to be an amazing resource. We'll be sure to link that in the show notes. But for now, Lacey, thank you so very much for coming on the show and sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge and making it so practical and simple for people. Where can people go to find you, connect with you and your work, and where can people go to pre-order the book?
Yeah, so it's available for pre-order everywhere books are sold. You can also learn more about it on my site, cleanish.com. which is also where I share about my coaching and such. And I'm on Instagram at Lacey Baier and always sharing about ways to lose weight in a sustainable, realistic way.
Love it. That's amazing. We'll be sure to link all that in the show notes, like I said. And for now, thank you so very much for all of your amazing journey and for being willing to share that with people out there. I know writing a book is probably not the easiest thing to do, but I'm glad that you were able to do it and put it out there and make it really practical for people. So thank you so very much, Lacey, for coming on our show today and sharing your knowledge with us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.